It's time for Forward Nation Radio. Now here he is, the host of Forward Nation Radio, David Leventhal.
French President Emmanuel Macron gives a dramatic speech in which he warns the world of the rise of totalitarianism. And then he comes to meet with the object of his speech, American President Donald Trump. This is Forward Nation Radio with me, David Leventhal. On today's show, a little bit of discussion of the news, but not very much because we are very excited to have a special guest for today's show. We want to spend a lot of time with Gail Collins, the esteemed columnist of the New York Times. First, a little bit on the crazy front, however. The tax bill. Did you notice that there is a DonorsChoose.org petition to fund our public schools? DonorsChoose.org. Yeah. That's where we've come to in this country. Let that marinate for a few moments. To fund our public schools, we're asking for volunteers to sign a petition and donate money. But do you know what this weekend was? No, not that. In case you were still celebrating 420 Day, you might have missed that this weekend was Earth Day. Were you unable to attend the wake? Here's the way the New York Times article began. A huge oil spill, a river catching fire, lakes so polluted they were too dangerous for fishing or swimming, air so thick with smog it was impossible to see the horizon. That was the environmental state of the nation 50 years ago. Or, as Scott Pruitt, the administrator of our Environmental Protection Agency, would put it, the good old days. The threat to America from this administration is not limited to the environment. We like to talk about the judiciary because we think that it is an underreported story. Because the legacy of the Trump administration, whatever it does, short of nuclear holocaust, much of it will be able to be reversed. But its appointment of judges to lifetime appointments will not be so easily rolled back. Today, the Supreme Court was hearing oral arguments on Trump's travel ban, testing whether a president of the United States has any checks and balances against whatever bullshit, obvious pretext he comes up with to feed raw meat to a xenophobic and racist base. Are there any checks and balances left on presidential power? It is a reminder of the importance of judges. It is a reminder of why Trump and the Republicans are filling our federal courts with right-wing apparatchiks. People like, did you notice the confirmation hearing of Wendy Vitter for district court judge? Wendy Vitter, whose husband was a U.S. senator, imprisoned ultimately for running a prostitution ring, but we won't visit the sins of the husband upon the wife. We're not Fox News. Wendy Vitter, in her confirmation hearing, was asked if she agreed with the Supreme Court decision in Brown v. Board of Education, which is like asking if you believe in drinking water. Brown v. Board of Education, the historic decision from 1954, saying that separate but equal was inherently unequal and overturning the infamous Plessy v. Ferguson decision. A decision that it's really easy to say, of course, Brown v. Board of Education was rightly decided, unless you want to go back to the days of separate bathrooms and separate water fountains, which maybe she does. One of the overlooked news stories of the last couple of weeks was the death of liberal icon, Ninth Circuit Federal Appeals Court Judge Stephen Reinhardt. Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals is one level below the United States Supreme Court. And the Ninth Circuit is the largest and in many respects the most important of our numbered circuit courts. His last decision before passing away was to promote equal pay for men and women. There are now 8 vacancies among the 29 active judges on the Ninth Circuit. Trump and the Republican Senate will have the ability to dramatically change the Ninth Circuit and change its rulings and limit its ability to stand up for worker rights, equality, environmental protection, a future. There are almost 150 vacancies in total in federal district courts and appellate courts around the country, which they are racing to fill with the help of an ultra-right-wing religious organization, Alliance Defending Freedom. Filling it with judges you can expect, and they know, will not evolve on the courts. Republicans don't even believe in evolution in many cases. Certainly the Alliance Defending Freedom judges are unlikely to. Unlikely to evolve, but instead to render decisions for the party that put them into place in the first place. A threat to the basic value of law and order in America. Yes, that's serious. Just yesterday, a district court ruled on DACA. The Trump administration, it turns out, argued that the law was unlawful, and as the district court pointed out, it was virtually unexplained, the grounds on which the program was allegedly unlawful. I guess the Trump administration figured they had a George W. Bush appointee ruling on this case, and they wouldn't have to make a good legal argument. The political argument stood for itself. But it turns out they may have gone a little bit too far. And this W appointee, in fact, ruled against the Trump administration, at least for now, and sent it back to them. They won't make this mistake in the future. They will be certain of the decisions that will come down. We are seeing a full-out attack on the courts because they're issuing rulings, such as that issued and those issued, to limit Scott Pruitt and his efforts to roll back environmental protections nationwide. What's keeping our air breathable is courts not allowing them to continue their agenda. We were reminded the last couple of weeks of the importance of courts with an important op-ed by a woman named Lily Ledbetter, who we talked about a long time ago on this show, as faithful listeners may recall. Lily Ledbetter suffered from gender discrimination, pay discrimination for many years, until she finally found out she was being paid far less than her male peers and sued. Her case went to the United States Supreme Court, which ultimately ruled that even though her latest paycheck represented pay discrimination, the statute of limitations, her time to bring the lawsuit, started running at her first instance of pay discrimination, even though she didn't even know she was being discriminated against. A ruling not to promote the rule of law, but to promote the rule of employers. That decision, we are reminded of the importance of government, was overturned by Obama and a Democratic Congress. And the first act that Obama signed is called the Lily Ledbetter Act, saying that every instance of pay discrimination restarts the statute of limitations. This is why the full-out attack on the courts matter. This is why Democrats need to win the Senate in 2018 and stop this. Anyway, lots more to talk about, but we really want to get into our discussion with the esteemed, the witty, and brilliant op-ed columnist of the New York Times, Gail Collins, the first and to date only female editorial page editor of the New York Times. We will discuss with Ms. Collins not only the threat to the judiciary from the Trump administration, but the threat to media, the threat to journalism, the threat to truth. Enjoy. Welcome back to Forward Nation Radio. We are sitting with our very special guest, op-ed columnist for the New York Times, Gail Collins. Gail, welcome to Forward Nation Radio.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
We met a long time ago. I don't want to say how long. You were editing the editorial page, and you reached out to local professors to generate interest in community relations, and you guys gave me a hat.
Put it on. Come on.
And I have been putting it on. I've been wearing it ever since.
Yay!
I have felt indebted to you for probably about 15 years.
I'm honored.
And finally, after all that time, I have a chance to return the favor.
Okay.
We're giving you a cap for Forward Nation Radio.
I love it. This is great.
I also was remiss. Yeah, you can take it. I was remiss at the time in not congratulating you. I should congratulate you for first female editorial page editor of the New York, and apparently the last female editorial page editor of the failing New York Times.
I was the last, I guess. Yes, no,
You've been followed by two men, and obviously you don't have much longer to go.
what can I say?
That's got to be. It's got to rankle a little bit, the failing New York Times bit from the president.
I don't know. I've sort of gotten used to it as one of his strange things. It doesn't. The fact that he's so obsessed with us, I think, is sort of a compliment myself.
Do you think it's been good for the paper?
Well, if you judge it by circulation and stuff like that, yeah, it's been people have never been so focused, in my memory, on the news and on what we're doing, and so conscious of the idea that the papers like the Times are there trying to make sense of all this, and that we're protecting them in some way.
Well, in that vein, I also have to offer, I guess, kind of condolences. One of your colleagues was in a bit of hot water. You must be very upset about the Sean Hannity
Oh, it's
thing.
terrible,
It
terrible,
must
terrible,
be awful.
terrible,
To see a
terrible.
journalist like that go bad, it's got to be hard.
And I don't know what to say about Sean Hannity.
But in seriousness, there's a lot to be positive of journalistically with how real news like the New York Times has come back. And yet, again, Fox News has got to get under your skin. I'm sure you're nice about it. You can be nice about it, but it's got to get under your skin.
It's sort of troubling when you watch it that, and there are a lot of people on the news that you expect to be, they're coming from some side. Every discussion thing you see, there's somebody who used to work on the Clinton campaign or something, and somebody who used to work on the Trump campaign, and they're sitting there with somebody else and they're discussing and arguing. But the way Fox does it is troubling. The way it just grabs up its banner and runs with it, and doesn't seem concerned at all about trying to keep things balanced in any way is worrisome.
And yet the response from people, the Fox News defenders, will be, you've got the liberal New York Times on the left, and Fox is just maybe some balance on the right.
Well, if you think about editorial, we've always thought in newspapers, at least newspapers like the Times, that there's an editorial page which has opinions, and then there's the rest of the paper which reports the news. And if our attempts to report the news had not been balanced, there would be a hell of a lot more Democrats out there just never complaining about our coverage, which has not happened a lot in a long time. I mean, certainly Hillary Clinton complained about Times coverage. Barack Obama complained about things when he was president. It's not, you don't expect, I think you get a little worried if you've got a chief executive who thinks that you are so great that everything you say is perfect, and that he watches you day and night and nothing else and hires your people to work in his administration. You wonder, I mean, if you're a normal news organization, what's going wrong here? Why this is all happening?
If you're being attacked on both sides, it's a sign that maybe there's something you're doing right, at least.
At least. We hope that.
We're having this conversation in the aftermath. You were speaking to Queens College students a little earlier, and I was
really delightful Queens College students, by the way.
That's the only kind we have.
I believe it.
Present company especially. When I point out that that you were the trailblazer with respect to being a woman editing the editorial page. In a sense, you're a trailblazer, I think, in another way as well. You were talking about using humor as part of your columns, in part to keep people's interest. There's sort of been a lot of that since you started. I'm sure you're not going to take credit for it, but maybe you could. Does that make you hopeful? Do you think that's a good thing? The Daily Show, we've got Stephen Colbert, Bill Maher. I mean, you've got so much comedy and news together.
Here's an interesting question that perhaps you can answer, or somebody could do a term paper on this if you want. I've always wondered that. When talk radio, talk TV even boomed, liberals tried to establish their own crazy liberal talk radio guys, and it didn't really work at all. It seems as if liberals just cannot do angry talk radio. On the other hand, Republicans do not seem capable of doing humor. Have you noticed? I mean,
Yeah.
All of the comedy shows are from the left. There's just, and I don't, there's some answer to this that will say something about something, but I don't know what.
Not only do they not do it, they frequently don't seem to get it. How many years was it before Republicans seemed to understand that Stephen Colbert was a joke?
Well, yeah, it took a while.
When Bush invited him to the to speak at the Correspondents'
Right.
Club dinner, there was some speculation that he didn't realize it was a joke.
I'd like to think that wasn't true, but still, yeah. I mean, there is that kind of time when you do that thing. But think about it. Why is there's nobody who's funny like on Fox that I know of? There's nobody who does humor columns from the right. Somebody must, and they're going to call me tonight and tell me about it. But it's so disproportionately skewed to the left when you're talking about comedy, and so disproportionately skewed to the right when you're talking about angry voices out there taking in callers and running shows. I don't know what that means, but it's something.
Even when they tried to do that, what was it? Was it Air America? Was that the radio? Was it
the
it didn't Franken was their headliner?
It did not work out.
And it didn't work out. And they still tried the humor. They didn't do the anger thing. You have no idea why. Any speculation that you're willing to share as to why?
No, I don't. I mean, I got into humor because I was trying to find ways to originally get people interested in the Connecticut General Assembly when I was covering it, which was really, really, really hard. And I used different tricks, but the humor one did seem to work best. I'm not sure I ever got anybody really interested in the Connecticut General Assembly, but still I got more readership when I made fun of them than when I did anything else.
Well, we get on this show, the producer tries to get me angry. It's true. I prefer the humor than getting angry. He takes my cookies before the show. It doesn't work. It just doesn't. It gets me angry for a little while. It doesn't translate onto the show. You mentioned, when you were talking earlier, you mentioned you go out drinking, you hang out with your colleagues, and then at the end of the day, whatever, you go out drinking. There was this old idea of the newspaper person of hard drinking. I wonder if I assume that was a thing of the past. I'm wondering if there's some truth to that, and if there's more truth to that now than there was, let's say, 2 years ago.
It pretty much is a thing of the past. When they used to talk about the boys on the bus and people covering campaigns, the schedule of a campaign would be you would get on the bus in the morning and your candidate would go do 2 or 3 things, and then there would come the time when everybody had to file because that was the deadline hour, and they would put you in a room somewhere and everybody would file their stories, and then it was 7 o'clock at night and everybody was just hanging out, or 8 o'clock or 9, whatever it was, and then everybody would go out and drink. And you kind of all got done at sort of the same time, and then you were really done because nothing could happen because the paper's out, it's in print. And so then you could go and drink. And there were bars around, particularly around the tabloids, around the Daily News and the Post, where people would just go and hang out at night. And it was a grand tradition. I mean, it was probably not that healthy, but still grand.
Do you think, in some respects, the Trump administration being what it is, do you feel liberated by that at all? Has it affected what I know you could, if you choose, we found out you can write fuck in your column. So there's a certain liberation
It's
there.
really
like
hard.
Liar.
Really, really hard. You do not do that easily at the New York Times. Trust me. Really, really hard.
I don't know if you've done it yet, but some of your colleagues have, of
But
course.
it's
when
just really,
you
really
mention
hard.
women.
Lots of
What about
discussion.
liar?
Liar now is a lot easier than it used to be. I think the great dramatic moment came when Trump finally admitted that Barack Obama had been born in the United States, but then he instantly tried to blame it on Hillary Clinton and said that she was the one spreading these rumors. And the Times wrote a story, if I remember correctly, in which it directly said Trump was lying about this. It was a news story. And the idea that you would say was lying about this, about a president or a presidential candidate, was a big kind of leap that we didn't think we'd ever be taking, but here we are.
So are there big editorial meetings where they're basically sitting down and saying, okay, what are the rules? When can we say lie?
I don't know, because we don't go to the news side meetings. They have their own entire culture. The only time I have ever been an active participant in a news side meeting was when I was the editorial page editor and we had the blackout. And the entire city had gone black. You know, there was nothing, and we were trying to figure out how to get the paper out and what we could do and everything else. And it was so dramatic and weird and crazy that they allowed opinion people into the newsroom meeting. But that's the only time I ever got in, anyway.
So who looks at what you write and says you shouldn't say this, or do you just kind of know that from having done this for a long time?
Well, for me in particular, for the columnists, there's not a normal editor. You know, actually, I've never told anybody this before, but at night I sent my column to my husband to read, because he's the only one I've got around who will say, it's really boring there in the fourth paragraph, or that ending doesn't make any sense. There's nobody else around who does that with columnists. So you have to find your own person for that kind of stuff. But for the questions of, is this libelous? Is this something we can say? Is there, you know, do we use this word in the paper? There are copy editors and and now they're editors. But anyway, there's a guy that my thing will go to. It's usually a guy named Bruce, who's very, very smart, and he just goes over to make sure I'm not libeling anybody. I'm not saying anything that the Times doesn't say, like that word, and stuff like that.
Did you see the movie The Post?
Of course.
Did you have the same reaction that your new executive editor had? They're gonna now they make a Watergate movie about the New York Times.
I can see, you know, when I watched the movie, watching Meryl Streep, who is so amazing. I mean, I can see why they were trying to figure out a way to make the movie about Katharine Graham, because it was such a great character and the thing went so well. And it's true. I mean, it was the New York Times story, but if you're going to turn it into a movie, I can see why they did it the way they did. I'm not bitter. I'm okay. And
you did get the New York Times did get a good shout out. I had read what he said before I saw the movie, and you certainly were well represented in the movie. You've written books about sexual equality. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you've written a lot of columns about it. Obviously, this is an important issue. You've got to be pretty happy about the Me Too movement. Yeah, the thing about the Me Too movement that the way I like to think about it in particular is, I mean, beyond all the other issues of unfairness, is that you're hitting a point in which the workplace in this country is going to be equally populated by women, where women are going to have the same career path that men, where the idea of thinking about work in all of its ways is not going to be much different between men and women. And among all the other important things that the Me Too movement has done, one of the most, I think, is to help us to figure out how to make women able to get through their work life without having any of this stuff come in. I mean, it's just wiping it out of the job market completely it's important in terms of sexual harassment. It's also really important just in terms of reorganizing the workplaces of America so that women function in there exactly the same way that men do. And it
God, I mean, it's just an amazing story. It's just a great moment, and I'm so proud of my colleagues at the Times who were so active in starting it.
And just won a Pulitzer.
And just won a Pulitzer.
You're on the Pulitzer board, I
I'm on the
understand.
Pulitzer board,
You
but-
recuse yourself from that?
Yes, I want the world to know, whenever the Times is up for anything, I have to go and sit in the hallway on a plastic chair. And the Times was up for like 9 things this time around. So I spent a lot of time in the hallway at the journalism school at Columbia, sitting in a plastic chair. Nobody talked to me. I just sort of sat there for a long time.
And then they invited you in and said, you can
Once-
come back in the room now?
Yeah, then they said, you can come back in the room, we're done. And then they sent me away again, and I went away again. But it was worth it because several of the Times' great pieces were recognized.
So you're optimist, I hate to use the term, that the movement's going to have legs, so to
The
speak.
movement's
This
got
is-
legs. Oh my God, yes. I have no doubt whatsoever that if you start out. When I started, I did a book on the millennium in the year 2000. I did it in like in 1990 something, and the Times asked me to do something on women over the last millennium, women over the last 1,000 years. I had not thought that largely before, women over the last 1,000 years, but and the guy who was the editor then said, I don't want to prejudice you about how you'll write this, but I think this is a win. And when I wrote it, I thought, holy God, this is, I came out of a 1,000-year period in which women were barely recognized as human beings. And when I was in high school, women were all forced to take Christian family living, they called it in my home ec. And you weren't supposed to take physics, and if you did, that was very weird. And most women presumed they weren't going to go away to college. They were going to stay home so they could get married, and they would be a teacher maybe for a while and then get married, and then they wouldn't teach. And all that stuff changed in my lifetime. I mean, the transformation in the lives of women that I have seen in my lifetime is just enough to make you believe in everything ever. It's just such an amazing, amazing story. It knocks me out whenever I think about it.
So a lot of the Trump support, of course, is about retrenchment. This one's gone too far. They're not going back on this.
I'm not worried about the retrenchment thing. I'm not at all worried about that.
Okay, you are famous. In the couple minutes we have left, you are famous in your column for asking humorous quizzes.
Something terrible is about to happen here.
We wanted to finish with what I think will be an easy quiz. I don't think we have enough time for multiple choice. We got to finish. Who said the following? Character matters to the presidency, and Donald Trump will bring the highest level of integrity to the highest office in the land. You can count on it.
That's sort of Mike Pencean.
That is Mike Pencean. That is Mike Pence. Are you feeling good about having the integrity brought back to the presidency?
So good, yes. Every day I get up and I think, wow, now we've got the integrity thing brought back. Oh, yeah, right.
Are you an optimist? You said earlier that you will write something good about Trump. You said sooner or later something will work out in his presidency. Are you normally an optimist?
Yeah, I am pretty optimistic, to tell you the truth, although I spend all my time complaining about stuff, which is my job. But, deep in my little heart, I am.
Okay, we're running out of time. Who said he could have done better about Trump's claim that there were very fine people among the white nationalists in Charlottesville, Virginia, who chanted, "Jews will not replace us"?
He could have done better. Everyone said he could have done better. I think you mean Paul Ryan, but everybody said that.
I mean Paul Ryan.
Yeah.
Had some harsh words for the president.
And now he's leaving. He's driven Paul Ryan away. That's kind of amazing.
Well, he's accomplished everything he wanted to accomplish.
Yep.
And now he's worried about getting radioactive. He's figuring whether he's running in 2020 or 2024, you figure?
He's already said he's running. Oh, Paul Ryan?
Paul Ryan.
Yeah, I think Paul Ryan's moment is over. I'm interested.
Really?
I mean, he used to be sort of like if you talk to like intelligent male conservatives, they just love Paul Ryan more than anybody in the entire world. They were just so gaga because he thought about deficits and stuff, and he had like pointers, and he was so charming. But now I don't know anybody who's into Paul Ryan anymore. Except,
So last question. Who has said, and I'll try to do a voice, this has been a year of extraordinary accomplishment for the Trump administration.
Is that Mitch McConnell?
That wasn't Paul. Thank you. Identifying that you probably knew the quote, but I'm gonna read that as my impression.
It was all your impression.
One.
It was great.
Was it? You had mentioned earlier about becoming good citizens. What's required? Last thought. What's required to be a good citizen?
To be a good citizen is to take an interest and pay attention to what's going on in the country and attempt in some way to relate to your community and do something positive.
Good lesson to leave on with our students present
Last
in the
thing
room.
to do. I can tell they're all going to do that too. It's great. Such great kids.
They're going to do that if they want an A. Gail, thank you so much
It's a pleasure.
for joining us.
A pleasure. Thank you, guys.
We'll be right back.
A special thank you to Gail Collins for that interview, which we hope that you enjoyed as much as we enjoyed doing. We hope to have Gail back, so I have a chance to ask her if she envisions the New York Times op-ed page as a springboard to a gig on Fox and Friends. Before we leave, though, I'd like to propose a toast. A toast to Ronnie Jackson, who you might know was nominated to lead the VA, but whose nomination appears to have been derailed. I started doing this already. Appears to have been derailed, okay, in a process that the President of the United States just described as ugly and disgusting process. Yeah, vetting to see if you're qualified to run a $155 billion a year agency with 300,000 employees, that is really ugly and disgusting. Just because this guy appears to have a bit of a drinking problem, and maybe a problem with being a bit of a prick to his staff, you guys don't know what you've got going for you. Okay, is that really reason to not let him head this huge federal agency? You could see Ronnie Jackson going, wait, why me? They're saying I'm not qualified? This is an administration with President Trump, Vice President Pence, Attorney General Jeff Sessions, National Security Advisor John Bolton, EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt, Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke, Education Secretary, that fucking moron without an education, Betsy DeVos. And now you're worried about qualifications? I need a drink. Anyway, this has been Forward Nation Radio. If you're still on Facebook, why? Please like us. Like Looking Forward, go to forwardnationradio.com. That's forwardnationradio.com and get the full experience. You'll see the video from this and all of our episodes there and on our YouTube channel as well. Don't miss the next Forward Nation Radio podcast on Podbean at podbean.com. If you love what you heard, like what you heard, tolerate what you heard, and show up on Facebook or Twitter on occasion, please like us in those places. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Spread the word. Forward Nation Radio. Have a nice week.
You've been listening to Forward Nation Radio with David Leventhal.